It back so quickly after lunch. That was a wonderful session this morning, and I'm really pleased that we were all able to get so, connected into a deep discussion, both with military personnel and with the community. I think lots of people had said during the week that the security of the country, of course, is paramount, and peace and security is one of the key things. We needed the military forces for that. So all week, well, the last 2 days, but this morning, to recap on this morning's exercise, we had the Chief of Defence Staff sent or delegated a representative, as he did yesterday, but also today, in addition, sent Major General Schaffer, who's a coordinator of Operation Safe Corridor, which we all heard about. In addition to that, they sent the legal advisor for the National Defense, the Defense Chief of Legal Advisor, basically to walk through the legalities. And we had a very detailed discussion on what is going on with Gombe State. We had a detailed discussion about scale. There's only a couple of hundred people at the moment that are, being within the program, and we know that there's potentially thousands. But I think we had a good discussion around peace, both community level peace. We saw the wonderful representatives from the local government chairman of Madagali local government in Adamawa State, to traditional leaders from Borno State, and Mamasi JTF, who's my personal favorite, Hajia, who also brought some very sort of real and almost shocking perspectives to the table. And now we come to this afternoon, where we were trying to run on time, and therefore we apologize that we gave you some homework to do over lunch. But we're sort of compiling all of your thoughts and putting it all together in a draft communique. Before that, we're going to try to show you, and maybe not, so we may take elders' wisdom and advice and not. One of the things we were told, I see that the data people, the IT people are having some problems, but one of the things we've heard consistently through this conversation is the need for data, data, data. We've had our friend from the National Bureau of Statistics talk repeatedly, about the need for, I wrote it down, robust, consistent, timely data with integrity. He asked that we all collaborate with the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS. Well, as most of you know, we are already collaborating with the National Bureau of Statistics on the side of the HRP, the Humanitarian Response Plan. We work very closely with them, and they actually are the partner on displacement management systems. They're the government lead at federal level on displacement management systems with IOM. So we are working with the National Bureau of Statistics, but there is a need to do more. He said that they're underfunded, and that, of course, has also been a challenge, because as I've approached their Statistician General several times to please go down and do some more detailed research for us in the field, they have faced that challenge. But as we've talked about data, one of the things that sort of we had thought about earlier on and had been working on in the background with the team is some sort of a data thing. I shall have somebody explain that better. Steve looks most displeased. A data thing, which we have basically collated data from USAID projects, DFID projects, World Bank projects, government data. We're sort of putting it out there for people to be able to access. It is not complex, it is supposed to be user-friendly, and it is not at all complete. But we have a beta version that we may be able to show you, and if we can't show it to you, then, oh, we can. Technology works.
one of the feedbacks which we've received from several people is the fact that there are different places to gather information from. And so everybody's saying if Mr. A is doing this, and Mr. B is doing this, and Mr. C, which of the data is reliable? How do we get access to it? And most importantly for us with what we are trying to do here is, how can we make this data easily understandable by the average Nigerian who isn't in this room? So people who aren't development experts or humanitarian experts, how do they get access to this information? Next slide, please. Now, with this platform, which will show you a real-life information, what this tries to do is a system where if you if you come to this platform and you click on a state, for instance, depending on what matrix you want, it tells you exactly what information you need. So, for instance, number of people in need of food. From this map, we can tell you from what state, the number of people who have been fed up, number of people who are in need, and most importantly, what this helps us do is to be able to forecast. So you'll be able to compare what the situation was a year ago, what the situation is this year, which would help for planning in the next year. So we will actually go to the live platform to show you what we've done with test data. We've gotten test data from World Bank, from WF, from World Food Program, and from USAID, and we'll show you
we've tried to make it very simple for people to pick data they need in terms of needs analysis and also decision making. Here we have a list of organizations we already input some data for. Keep in the back of your mind that this system allows you to input as much data as you need for the key stakeholders in the sector. So I'm going to start with USAID. We have some data from the work USAID has done in the Northeast in terms of assistance. So we are going to, but this shows the work that has been done by USAID in 2016 and in 2017 over 4 different sectors: Food for Peace, Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, Stabilization Assistance, and Development Assistance. From this chart, you can see that in 2016, Northeast Assistance, they spent $99 million on it. And for 2017, they spent $385 million. Then you can go ahead and drill down a bit into the data that has been presented. So for 2016, for instance, you can decide to see what the breakdown of that data is.
It hasn't been here at the national conversation, so now we'll make sure that we include that in some communique going forward. I'm amazed that here we are at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon after a 8-7 conference week, and I still have a packed room. Don't you all want to go home? Don't you guys just want to go? Okay, go. As you can see, it's a work in progress. Once we all fix the power sector, we will be able to show it to you more effectively. But it really, this is some back-end work that is very, very much in process. The Honourable Minister of State for Budget and Planning, Hajia Zainab Ahmed, who has just joined us for this afternoon's closing session. Welcome, Hajia. I would like to recognise and welcome USAID Director Steve Haken, who's been with us all day. So welcome back. Thank you, Steve. I'd like to welcome Rashid Ben Masood, the Country Director of the World Bank. Welcome. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the Country Director of KOICA, the Korean Development Cooperation Agency, Suki. I'd like to welcome the UNRC acting, my brother, Mr. Mohammed Fall, and UNICEF representative. Welcome. I'd like to welcome Elua Fillon, ICRC representative in Nigeria. And last but not least, the World Food Programme country representative for Nigeria, Miata Kaulad. We're expecting Debbie Palmer, who's just sent a message just now to say she's running a couple of minutes late. Debbie is the head of DFID for Nigeria. But I would also like to welcome to join the guests at the front table the Deputy Regional Director for the IOM, Sophie. I'm not going to massacre your last name. Please come and join the Minister up front. I know you have to leave, but please still join us. We had, the last Regional Director we had joined us, so please. And we need a gender balance. Also recognizing the head of mission for IOM, Enira, who I don't know why you're sitting in the back either. Enira, thank you very much. What a week. What a week. Wow. This was envisaged initially as a 2-day national conversation. We were going to have Thursday and Friday to deliberate and to talk, and we were going to have galleries during the week and have a few people drop in and talk to some young people. The demand was such that it ended up being 7 high-level meetings, each one attended by at least 100 people. The conversations went on and on and on. It has been quite clear that the meeting was not only timely, but desperately needed. It has been quite clear that it was desperately needed also from those that we heard from the community, from the military who was represented here at the highest level today, that it needed to be a Nigeria-led conversation. The pride in the room from the young people and the community leaders who came up and said that, you know, we really can do this and we really should do this was really touching. For me, it has been a privilege the entire week of interacting mainly with young people, actually, because the entire team is young. You know, the youth fellows from the NERI program who've been in and out, various photographers, Tabitha, who's outside, and I don't know if the Honourable Minister has had a chance to meet her yet, but Tabitha has done some paintings and they're displayed outside. Tabitha is from Chibok. 2 of her sisters disappeared when the girls were abducted at Chibok, and she's sort of done art therapy to get herself to where she is today, now just having done her WASC, I don't know what it's called anymore, exams just recently. Having that level of interaction, her excitement at meeting some just really amazing people, but also just interacting with other young people from not just around her region, but from around Nigeria. IOM brought Tabitha in, and thank you very much. My privilege to see Talatu again, a wonderful young woman that I first met in Goza 2 years ago, who was the only person in the community, really, the only staff member, it seemed, of any UN agency. And she's also outside because she's accompanying Tabitha. And all the young children running after her and shouting, Auntie Talatu, Auntie Talatu, Auntie Talatu. It's been a privilege to interact with many of you. Thank you. On this desperately important topic. And this desperately important topic for our nation. It has been a national conversation. We said that peace couldn't be achieved without the military in the conversation. So up till yesterday morning, we were ringing the Chief of Defense Staff, who delegated Major General Shaffer, who's the head of Operation Safe Corridor, to come here today, and also sent his legal advisor to lead what was just the most incredible conversation around young people who are being de-radicalized and their reintegration into society. That really is what took us off track slightly today, because those interactions were so rich that people just wouldn't let them go. And that session went about an hour and a half over time. We heard that there's about 250 young people, young men mainly, who've been taken into Gombe State to be de-radicalized. We hear that about 95 of them have graduated. We hear that another 150 are coming into the program. We also heard from the participants that, but you're only talking about maybe 400 people, but the scale is in the thousands. We heard from the participants, from the secretary to the government of Adamawa State, do you ever think this is going to end? We heard from the military general who said confidently, he said, I went to Liberia and we brought peace. He said, I went to Sierra Leone as a junior officer and we brought peace. And he said, in Nigeria, by the grace of God, we will bring peace. We moved on to hear the voices of communities from Madagali to Borno, from Chris, young Chris, who's been into communities in Northeast and has had people who are not of his faith or of his tribe or of his language group name their children after him, a young Christian Southeasterner. We had a national conversation. Yesterday, the panel on Inside Perspectives had a woman from the Southeast who talked about the IPOB crisis and what was going on there. A man from the Niger Delta who's been involved with militancy and bringing peace in that region. We had the secretary to the government of Adamawa lay out the most beautiful vision for the Northeast that I've ever heard, and I hope some of the people who are in the room are in touch with him so that perhaps we can make that vision a reality. He talked about a road that would connect, I forget how, my geography is really shocking, so I forget how exactly it was, but he talked about a road that would connect the entire northeastern states. He talked about fiber optic cables, about electricity, about water. It was a national conversation. The young people in the room back again today, some of them back in the room today, talked to the military commanders that they normally don't have access to, and they asked questions and they said, how? How do we refer our friends or people to you? How do we know about these programs? We heard about the young woman who was a commander in Sambisa Forest who just entered formal education, Western education last week. Who's been gone for 10 years? Since she was 9 years old. She's been gone for 10 years. She's only just come back. Who said that, basically, my words, not hers, but that the lack of inclusion is part of the reason for this crisis. Because she said, in the forest, we're all equal. She said, as a woman, I'm trained to sit on top of tanks and fire. She said, as a woman, I'm given rights along everybody else. The young people are treated equally. They're not relegated to the back. It actually occurred to me as I arrived this morning, we had a group of young people and they were sitting at the back, and I said to them, what are you doing at the back? Come to the front. That lack of inclusion was identified as part of the problem. So as we end what has been just an incredible week, we have communiques from the INGO forum, which will be distributed afterwards. And we are also working on a detailed communique, but I thought I would give you the highlights from that communique. The Nigeria-led national conversation on the humanitarian development peace nexus beyond the Northeast humanitarian crisis is the first of its kind, in keeping with the new way of working as local as possible and as international as necessary. Nigeria is leading the way in terms of nationally driven discussions around the HDPN. Nigeria is a key player on the global stage, and we are here to ensure, as I said earlier at the beginning, that she takes her rightful place amongst the polity of nations. The paper documents outcomes from this process that will be replicable going forward, but I'm just going to speak to a few of the key outcomes. One of the first things we heard from the Honourable Minister on the first day was that this will form the basis, the outputs from this will form the basis of a multi-year strategy for Nigeria going forward, which is to be linked in to the ERGP. All of these conversations that we have had, all of the comments, all of everything that has come forward will go in to the thinking for a multi-year strategy. We have wide-ranging, high-level agreement that the HDPN approach is absolutely critical and that the government will take the lead in providing a roadmap, inviting in our international partners to assist where necessary. Not always necessarily with funding, because that is where we're hoping to go to, and we heard that today, that Nigeria has resources. So it's not always with funding, sometimes with technical input, sometimes with advice, sometimes just with a friendly shake and a friendly nod to say, hey, you're going the right way. We've done this before, maybe somewhere else that you haven't, but you're going the right way. There's a call to adopt the HDPN approach in parts of the country that lag behind others, and that there might be issues bubbling up. But overarching all of this, there was an agreement across the board that there was a need to have conversations not just from the top down, but also from the bottom up. There is a need at village level for a Nexus conversation. There is a need at state level for a Nexus conversation. And there is a need at Abuja national level for ongoing Nexus conversations. In fact, the CEO of the National Economic Summit Group told me yesterday that there is a need for a Lagos Nexus conversation. So I think we established that this week, and that is very firmly within the communique going forward. There was a call to reconvene and for everybody to save a date in their diaries for the end of November, beginning of December, first week in December, to evaluate what have we done? What have we learned since we were last here? Because it is, what are the lessons learned? What are the mistakes? Celebrate the successes and commiserate together over the failures. Oh my goodness, that Nexus thing totally did not work in my corner of Borno State, but is doing really well in Yobe. So that we can move it forward. It wouldn't be as big as this, it wouldn't be as long as this, but it would be continuing the conversation. Because in between that, we would have to continue the conversation. It was acknowledged and put in the communique that actually we have operationalized the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus in Nigeria this week. We've operationalized it because the Borno State Commissioner of Health called me to say that he has convened the first Nexus meeting at state level with his health partners. So that will be one of the first lessons, and I'm happy that Dr. Azodo is here somewhere. One of the first lessons for us to learn from. How did it go there? That health system has already been trailing in that direction, and having put language around it, having a conversation has helped them move that forward. What was the other thing that we came to in this room this week? That we need to talk to each other. That there needs to be dialogue. We had in the, it was the food security side event, and it was humorous, it seemed at the time, but actually it's not that humorous. We had the great romance. Somebody from Propcom, which is a DFID project, said he talked about a great romance. And he was sitting with his GIZ colleague, and we teased them terribly and offered them flowers. But it's the truth. They're all talking together, and so they're moving together quicker. They're not in competition because, unfortunately, sadly, there is enough misery for all of us to share. There is no need for anybody to own their little piece of misery. And I think that is another thing that we came together to learn this week. That there are people at community level, like the young lady I've just described outside, like many of the young people that were here this week, one of whom showed a photograph of his friend of a river that he always remembers because his friend drowned in it 4 years ago trying to run away from Boko Haram. That these are real people, not numbers. They're not statistics. This is not a game. These are lives. And so we heard that we need a great romance between all of us, Nigeria, international, NGOs, everybody. Let's all be friends. It's complicated enough. Let's not make it more complicated. We learned that we will leverage learning from other settings, both locally, nationally, and internationally. We heard the need for data repeatedly. The man from the National Bureau of Statistics made impassioned pleas for more funding for the National Bureau of Statistics because he said that all of this needs to be underpinned by data. We heard that I'm going to quote him again, because he talked about the need for robust, consistent, timely data with integrity. And I'm going to include those words in the final communique. We heard that there needs to be better coordination at government level, both at federal and at state levels and at local government level. I spoke to a local government chairman from Madagali today, this afternoon, who highlighted that, and he came to say that some agencies and NGOs, as he was with me, his phone rang, and some NGOs had arrived in his community and they're calling him right now to say they don't have anywhere to store things. And he says, why didn't anybody just talk to me? We learned that there is a need for better coordination, not just therefore from government, but also within the international community themselves. It is about a handshake, and again, my friend's thing that, one hand is shaking and the other one is flapping. And they need to, I think I gave the example the other day, for those who are old enough to remember it, of the early days of internet, when you would try to dial in and it would be chick, 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 and then it would fall out and you'd be just completely frustrated. That is what we're seeing, it's falling out, and we need better connectivity. There needs to be private sector, key, center, grounded in all of this. And the private sector came to us this week in force. The policy drivers of the National Economic Summit Group were here in numbers. Their CEO himself was here with us for 2 days. Private sector is the key. And we recognized it, and it is included in the communique that they must be at the table going forward. We're looking at the full spectrum of interventions in the sequencing between development and humanitarian work, and the sequencing between working on life-saving and building towards resilience and recovery. Those are fine words, but many people don't understand that. We need to simplify those terms, and we need to make them practical and deliverable. Resourcing. There needs to be transparency in the allocation and use of resources from all stakeholders. And we need to enhance accountability, coordination, and transparency from government and donors on who is funding what. We need to have a main framework from the government for donors to plug into and say, this is what we want you to fund, as opposed to, well, 5 people can converge upon Dikwa local government and all be providing potentially the same service because we haven't provided that framework. So we take accountability on our side too and say that that framework needs to be provided. Because where there are donor funds, they must be efficiently spent, and then we must, as much as possible, prevent overlap. Youth. The youth asked that they be involved. They asked that they be allowed to tell their own story, that Nigeria be allowed to tell her own story, that the story not be told from outside, that the narrative not be one from the outside world, but that they as young people have risen up to put together a counter-narrative of what is being said about their own region and showing what is good about this country as opposed to what is bad, whilst accepting that there are challenges, as everybody has, but that if we, Nigeria and Nigerians, are allowed to tell our own story, then in many ways we will find it much quicker to achieve a sustainable peace. I think really, as a broad overview of the communique, those are the key aspects. If I were to say it in 3 words, I would say conversation at all levels. Not 3 words, 3 sentences. Conversation at all levels. I would say friendship to encompass coordination. And I would say deliver, and deliver fast. Thank you. The Honourable Minister and her guests will come up for the final closing session now. I would like to invite up the Honourable Minister of State of Budget and Planning, Hajia Zainab Ahmed, to sit down. Eloi Fignon, ICRC. The representative of the Chief of Defence Staff and Honourable Sonny Zoro were here earlier and were meant to be joining you, but I'm afraid they're running late. Mohammed Fall, UNRC Acting. Debbie Palmer. I would like to start with Mohammed. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of State for Planning and Budget, as I say, my sister Zainab Ahmed, my fellow colleagues and partner here around this table, around the table, development partner, United Nations, my sister Dr. Yodi, coordinator from the ECC, distinguished participant and all guests here. Just a few words in line with the remark I made in the opening ceremony yesterday, to say once again to you, Honorable Minister, that on behalf of Mr. Callon, on behalf of the UN family, on behalf of the humanitarian community, we thank you and commend your leadership for this initiative. Dr. Yodi said it all. It has not been only a timely initiative, but it was a much needed initiative. And for the wrap-up she just gave now, and for the session to which I had opportunity to participate had been, gave clear indication in this direction. And I just wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of UN to say we stand by the side of the government of Nigeria. We stand behind you. We seek for your leadership, for your guidance. And I take this opportunity to repeat the word I said yesterday in the opening. For UN today, engaging in a process, in this process of Nexus between humanitarian development, peace and security, it's not an option, it's a must. Based on the agenda of our organization, agenda of the leadership of our organization, agenda of the member state, but at the same time, based on the global expertise that we have gathered on through decades of work in different parts of the world. This is why also here in Nigeria, we are having the same stance as a family and as a community. And as I say, Honorable Minister, I'm seeking for your wisdom, seeking for your guidance, and seeking for your leadership, and also reiterated here our availability to be part of any process that can take this country forward in this direction. And as I say, for UN and for us, this country is so important because whatever we succeed here, I'm sure we will succeed it everywhere. And since we have challenge everywhere, we always want to take Nigeria as a school. We always want to take Nigeria as a blueprint. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'll just hand over to Debbie now.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I'd like to say just 5 very brief things, if I may, by way of wrapping up. We've had a really rich discussion. It was great to hear Dr. Yodi summing it up just now, but 5 things from me. The first is, we've talked a lot about the peace in the Nexus, and it's been great to have some representatives of the Nigerian military here as part of our discussions. And the first thing I'd like to say is, of course, we all know fundamentally security is the absolute underpinning of all of the work that all of us are doing to get people back to their homes, to restart their lives. So the more that we can enrich this conversation and continue this conversation with military counterparts and those that are providing that security, I think the better, because the more we're going to be able to actually direct and navigate what's going on in security terms on the ground to get people home. The second thing is that we've talked a lot about needing a framework within which all of us can dock, and that we're going to need coordination structures under that. And as I mentioned yesterday, for me, there are some really big lessons and some really big tips and hints that we can learn from our humanitarian structures. We have a very strong coordination structure there. It's not perfect. There are lots of things that maybe we could improve. We have a really big opportunity right now as we embark on a new process of recovery to build structures that will serve us well for the next 5, 10, possibly more years as we get people back into their homes and back standing on their own 2 feet. So rather than waiting until we have to do it retrospectively and we're all running around doing different things and need to patch it together, thinking very hard now about what would good practice look like in terms of coordination and building structures that are fit for the future rather than replicating the mistakes of the past will be really important. Thirdly, I absolutely support the statements that's been made about donors needing to be completely transparent. On behalf of the UK government, I am totally willing to sign up to that. It is a strong part of our commitment to the government of Nigeria that we are fully transparent and that we are coordinating really closely with government, both at state and federal and indeed local government areas. So the UK is strongly committed to that agenda and happy to support it going forward. Fourthly, I think just to pause for a moment, we need to recognise that northeast Nigeria won't look the same after this conflict as it did before the conflict. Many things will have changed. Many young children will have grown up in Maiduguri metropolitan area. Many of those families may not actually end up returning to the agricultural areas and to the rural areas. So we need to think flexibly about that, and we need to think about how we're going to help people in their current circumstances, but also get to the lives that they want to have, which may not be returning to the places from which they came. So we need to be quite creative and quite flexible in how we understand this and how we think about it. And then finally, linked to that, it's absolutely crucial that people's voices are heard, that people are included, that the people we're trying to serve, we are servants of the poor and the vulnerable, and that we do serve them, that we listen to them, that their voices are heard, but also their voices are heard within the decision-making structures, and that we build into our coordination, to our planning, to our frameworks, mechanisms so that we really can listen to people, and we really to provide effective communication channels for them to be able to talk to us in languages which they speak and in structures that they understand. And ensuring that we build this in from the get-go, again, will be a crucial part of building stable and robust social structures for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Debbie reminded us about the framework which you've all had input into this week, a sort of a mutual accountability framework, and all of that input is being put together and will be, packaged into the communique. But that was the very strong call coming forward. So thank you for reminding me of the word. I will go to Elua.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, all protocol duly observed. I'm really glad to be here with you today, although ICRC is always stepping alongside others, but separately from others. I'm quite impressed by the level of discussions that this conversation has brought into blurring the distinctions between relief, development, and peace building. And from an ICRC perspective, where we answer the needs of people based on discussion with these people directly, framed by international humanitarian law, we don't, as the International Committee of the Red Cross in our response, we don't make any distinctions between humanitarian aid, development, and else. And we are just basing our response to the immediate need of the people as they express them to us. And I understand that this approach is exactly what has been put in this conversation over the last few days, which from our own separate perspective shows that we are all going in the same direction. So we can take different ways, different paths, but the goal remains the same, and the goal here remains to provide the best service to the people in need in the Northeast and elsewhere for what we're concerned. So we don't, in our perspective, we don't talk about HDPN per se, but we have what we call the combined approach in our response, which match exactly in parallel what these conversations that you have been having over the last few days have been. And for me, I mean, and some of my colleagues have been participating more in depth into these few days conversation. I just see here after this conversation has gone through, just a major convergence in the directions that we are all taking, and it's only in favor of a more robust answer based not only on immediate survival needs of the people, but based as well on what Debbie has mentioned very clearly, work on fundamental infrastructure, which should be surviving 5, 10, or even more than a decade for the service of the populations in need. And here, what I would like as well to highlight importantly is, in our perspective, what remains key as well is to maintain a dialogue with all parties to the conflict. For what we're concerned, through the perspective of the respect for international humanitarian law, but this is key for building the prospect for a lasting peace in the future. And I'm glad that this as well has been one of the major highlights of the conversation you have had, because without this, we will have to, as Debbie said as well, replicate the same short-term measures along the way without building up for a more solid future for the people in need. So I'm just very impressed by the level at which this conversation has brought all these important issues forward, and I just would like to congratulate everyone for bringing up this conversation to the level that it is, and it just makes me more optimistic for the future. So thank you very much for all this.
Thank you, Eloa. The word convergence is a wonderful word. I like that. And I think, yes, there's been a convergence. Back to what Debbie said about the security forces, it was both exciting and mildly scary today to be sitting at a table with all these big men in uniform. But they were so engaged in the conversation, and they were so willing to be open and transparent. They got asked the difficult questions, and and talked about court-martials and what have you. And I think it is about keeping those doors open and converging. Because if if you haven't met them before, then you have a certain view and you have a certain perspective. And yeah, today, I mean, that whole table today was military men. We had unfortunately, many of them had to go to the mosque because, of course, today's Friday. But we had the Civil Defense Service, NSCDC, the Assistant Commandant General was here today. We had Major General Shaffer. We had the Commodore James. Commodore Pinder. How do you know? You've just arrived in Nigeria. Commodore Pinder. We had Commodore Pinder and, of course, all of their aides. So it was really, really very good. And they stayed the whole time. They left at 2:00. So it wasn't just a shoot in and shoot out. We converged. Rashid Ben Masood, World Bank Country Director.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yodi. Let me begin by thanking wholeheartedly the Honorable Minister of State, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, for really leading this work on the humanitarian development nexus and for holding this national-led dialogue. I think congratulations to the honorable ministers and to her team, to Dr. Yodi and the entire team of the Ministry of Budget and National Planning is really in order, and I would really like if you everyone could put your hands together for the honorable minister and her team. I would also like to say thank you to Dr. Yodi and her team, who have been doing a marvelous job in preparing for this conference. That this is not something that happened in 1 week. It has been planned for 6 months. Please put your hand together for Dr. Yodi and her team. I also would like to recognize my colleagues who have been really working very hard behind the scene and always behind the scene. And they have been also supporting this program, working with Dr. Yodi, Ayez, Parvez Ayez, please, Parvez. And Mary Morrison, yeah, the two of them. They are from the World Bank. And believe me, this has been a lot of effort, and there are many more who are present in this room, but just would like to ensure that you know that the World Bank has been very proud to support this program along with USAID and UK DFID. I think a lot has been said, and I think I'm not going to repeat what has been said, just highlighted and reinforced the same messages. Welcoming very much the government leadership both at the federal level and the states for the coordination. And this is a process that has been launched, and I think it is a process that will continue. And we really fully support this leadership of the government of Nigeria. I think, like you said, Dr. Yodi said, this dialogue has to be mainstream at all levels. It's not something that we just do and you have all the head of agencies and ministers and all. It has to be mainstream at all levels, including at the operational level, because at the end of the day, this coordination can only be effective that if all the work, this coordination happen at the state level, federal level, as well as the world level, at the local government, because there are going to be comparative advantage that each of the stakeholders in, and that we need to explore this comparative advantage for maximizing the synergy and the collaboration so that we can have a greater impact for those people that we are serving and for those people we wish to improve their life. So the operationalization of this dialogue at all levels need to continue. I think also we need to use the media to also knowledge and experiences. Let's establish a chat room where people can actually say what they are doing in different parts. So what are the good things that are happening? Because you see, there are a lot of good results, but they are not highlighted. And sometimes the simple result can be very helpful. A bore well that is done by a community is something that another community has never done it, could learn from. But let's try to find ways of communicating these results. Let's find ways of celebrating results, but also celebrating failure, because when we celebrate failure means that we should not repeat it again. I can tell you the president of the World Bank, when he came to the World Bank, the first day he says, I would like to learn about all the failure of the World Bank program. And I was at that time country director for Pakistan, and the first project that was reviewed was a Pakistan project. And I felt that I was very defensive because what's wrong with me? But that was just happened that it was a tax administration project. But the fact that we learned from it was so much revolutionized the way that we do program in tax administration. The importance of security has been reiterated, but communication of result is going to be important. Where are the things that I would like to see more of? And I hope that the next dialogue, we should do it now and the next month or so. I think we need to think about this convergence at the local government. This is where actually operationalization of the program. And let's use our existing operations. We have a large funding available in the Northeast. Let's make sure that now those conversions happen at the local government, and we need to work together with all our stakeholders, UN agencies, partners, and so on. Where I am missing, the banking sector. The banking sector is still reluctant to go to the Northeast. And it cannot happen. The banks should be ready to go to the Northeast. They should be able to lend to Boubacar. As I say, Boubacar is a welder. He needs a welding machine, but he doesn't have $200 to buy it. So therefore, the banking sector, if the local bank must lend to Boubacar, they must lend to Amina, who has a machine, a sewing machine, but she needs some working capital. Please, let's try to find ways of bringing the banking sector, the Nigerian banking sector, so that they trust Nigeria, they trust the Northeast, and they can do business in the Northeast. There is a possibility. We're not talking about building a $300 million nuclear plant. We are talking about building the people of the Northeast. And they can only, and the people of the Northeast need that trigger, that financing, that microfinance. Please, let's try to find ways of inducing the bank to work in the Northeast. So these are the two issues that I really want to put on the table as far as the next step, banking sector and convergence. Otherwise, I would like to congratulate you all for this outstanding platform, the national-led dialogue of the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashid. And yes, the banks. We engaged, as you said, in this sort of 6-month lead-up planning with the banks, and I think we managed to get UBA from Lagos level and Union Bank into the room. But as you say, there's still a reluctance. There's still a sense of seeing it more from a taking perspective, as in, you know, we've won a bid with a UN agency as opposed to a giving perspective for the community. And I think we're really all together as we speak to various CEOs. That was what I found out in my deep interactions with them, you know, that, well, you know, we want to bid for cash-based transfers with WFP or UNICEF or whoever, but are we willing to actually invest there? It is that investment level. So there's involvement of banks, but is there a willingness to invest? And I think we really do need to work on that. Social media, as you talk about social media, somebody actually just sent me a message and I forgot to say hello to our live stream audience. So I just was seen in tears by the entire world. Thank you very much. Live stream audience who are watching. Somebody from WHO headquarters in Geneva just said to congratulate everybody, and they're watching live. So hello to everybody who's been watching us live literally all week. Some in Nigeria, some from outside Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. We are using the media and we must continue to use it. And now it is my honor and privilege to invite the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and Planning, Hajia. The final remarks are yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Yodi, and good afternoon, everyone, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking the World Bank, USAID, and DFID for supporting us to organize this national dialogue. And it has been a very fulfilling one. It has turned out to be better than we expected. Let me just remind us that before the current president was elected, he was campaigning, and while he was seeking people's votes, he had made 3 commitments. 1, that he was going to ensure security and welfare of citizens. 2, that he was going to fight corruption. And then 3, that he was going to grow the economy. So for security and welfare of citizens, security was, of course, the military was charged, the armed forces was charged with that responsibility. Anti-corruption commitment, the anti-corruption agencies were charged with that commitment. To grow the economy became a charge of the Ministry of the Budget and National Planning. So we sat back, did an assessment of where we were at the time we were appointed as ministers. We had an economy that was clearly fast declining, and we knew we were going to go into recession. we also knew that there were a lot of plans that had been done in the past, and we looked at them, very good plans. And what were we going to do? We now pulled together all those plans and started extracting what was critical and vital to meet these three major commitments that the president made. And one of the plans that we made references to, of course, we used the power sector plan, the Vision 2020, the oil and gas sector plan, the agriculture sector plan. We also referred to the assessment that was done by the World Bank and other groups, assessment of the degradation and the destruction in the Northeast. We looked at the Bahari plan. We now came out with an outline of where we needed to go. And we sat down as an economic management team and said, okay, to grow the economy, what we need to do is to aspire to grow the economy to a rate where it supersedes the rate of our population growth, that is one. And secondly, that we must, at least by the year 2020, attain a growth of 7%. How do we do this? We wanted to make sure that we have a growth that is inclusive, that brings everybody along. And then we now step back and say, but 1/6 of our country is not contributing to the growth. The northeast part of our country is not contributing to growth. So in everything we do, we must make sure that the northeast is prioritized so that we can rebuild and reconstruct and rehabilitate people that need to be rehabilitated so that they can contribute to consumption and to the growth of the economy. And the president also said, okay, when you rebuild, we must aspire to rebuild back better than what was destroyed. So that was our mandate. So we designed this ERGP that has this 7% growth aspiration, and we had 5 key execution priorities, which is, of course, to stabilize the economy because there was a very high inflation rate, exchange rate had gone out of hand, and several other factors that we needed to make sure are okay. We also identified that there was a need to ensure food security, because any nation that is food insecure cannot be a nation that can grow. Remember that security is in the hands of the security agencies. And then we also said that for the Northeast and the Niger Delta, why do we have this crisis? The root cause of the crisis is, of course, underdevelopment. And what is the best way to bring back development is to rebuild infrastructure where it is broken and provide critical infrastructure so that people and businesses are able to grow and to thrive. And transportation was one of those critical infrastructures that we identified that needed to be rebuilt, so we're rebuilding these railways. But we also needed to rebuild back major roads that connected people and markets and communities. Then there was the power sector, which is the weakest of them all, because we need power for everything that you do to be able to provide adequate health care, to be able to provide education, and so on. We also decided that there was a need to grow small, medium enterprises, because those are the groups of businesses that will actually engage and employ more people so that we don't have too many unemployed people as we have at this time. All of this was supposed to be leveraging on the power of the private sector, and all of it underpinned by human capacity building, with a clear commitment that we must make sure that the growth we seek to achieve is inclusive and that we're leaving no one behind. So this is what we did. So we now agreed as a government and prepared the CRGP, and everybody adopted it. And the mandate every minister had then was to make sure in everything that you do, you must make sure that the activity is complementing the ERGP. So even in the humanitarian response, in the development response, our goal in the Ministry of Budget and National Planning is to make sure that what you're doing as our partners and friends is actually directly complementing the ERGP. We have prepared 3 humanitarian response plans, and we have succeeded with your support, with the funding from donors, to move the humanitarian crisis in the Northeast from an acute situation to a state now where we are looking at people returning to their homes. So what happens next is we have to move gradually away from humanitarian response. And Elliot, we are going to make sure that as we move. We still maintain humanitarian principles. We're not going to lose sight of that. But we have to start thinking more about development. And how do we do this? By having this kind of conversations. We can't assume that we know what to do as government. We have to engage people at the lowest levels. And yes, you're right, this conversation has to move from Abuja to the states and to local governments and to communities. We also have to move the conversation to the private sector, to the financial industry, because we have to have several people looking at these issues from different perspectives, and we need to bring all of it together into a multi-year plan. The process will be led by government, by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning. So we have a multi-year plan and a framework that everybody that is here working with us, supporting us, will key into. So for us, that is a major goal. And I can see clearly that we have already enough from the outcomes of this conversation to start our multi-year planning process. And we seek to plan together, not alone. We seek to make sure that we learn together, and also that we, I'm sure we'll make mistakes together, but we'll also make our corrections together. The social investment program that the federal government is running, a large proportion of it for all of the programs, from the homeschool feeding program, the Empower program, the JEEP, especially the conditional cash transfers. When you look at the data, most of it is provided to the Northeast. And that is because we want to make sure that that region has, as much as possible, enough assistance to be able to support the people so that they can come back on their feet, return to their normal activities, and continue and begin to contribute to the growth of our economy. From the conversation that has taken place this past week, the national conversation, we are taking away from a charge from this meeting that government must immediately start this development of the multi-year plan, and that we must engage as many partners as possible in the process, and that we will be instrumental to making sure that there will be conversations like this at different levels, including right down to the local government levels. And that from our ministry, and along with the Bureau of Statistics, we will be conducting surveys and gathering data so that all of us have data to use for our planning and also for the work we do on a day-to-day basis. The NBS continues to improve on its activities. If you see the activities, you see that data is now provided more timely, and it is actually more accurate, and therefore more reliable. So we have data work that is ongoing, but we will continue to improve on the work that MBS is doing. From the meetings that have taken place, we are going to start working directly with the NESG to arrange a program to have a conversation with the private sector, because resources are limited, government resources are limited, but also so are donor resources. There's also a lot of crisis across the world, so it's not just Nigeria. So we know, we're very conscious of the fact that we have to move very quickly to development. We have to move very quickly to the state where we have weaned our people off from aid, and that the humanitarian community is able to exit as soon as possible to go and meet the challenges of other crises in other domains. And we want to make sure that we involve our youths. On Tuesday this week, we were in Yola. Part of the program of Government of Social Investment included that we're going to develop 6 unique hubs across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. So in Yola this week, Tuesday, the Vice President launched a humanitarian innovation hub. And the participation was steep. It started from 500 participants, and we ended up with 12. And all of them very, very young people. The ideas that they had addressing how we can ramp up education in the Northeast region, how we can provide vital services in the region, it's just amazing. You just need to see what these youths have come up with. Simple things around agriculture, solutions, and so on. So we are actively engaging the youth, and these are businesses, these are ideas that they have that are very quickly we're able to turn them into businesses so that they can also be part of the solution. Let me just round up by saying that as much as possible, we will continue this type of dialogue. As we plan, we are very conscious of the fact that we don't have all of the expertise and we cannot plan alone. As we work, we know very well that the expertise of the humanitarian and development work is with our development and humanitarian partners, but that the government personnel have also been learning with you and working with you, and their skills and capacities are building up. So we seek to continue the partnership that we have. Let me, on behalf of the Minister of Budget and National Planning, the federal government of Nigeria, and the people of Nigeria, thank everyone that has supported us, and thank you very much for staying through the whole of this week and being part of this process. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The conversation has started. Let's keep it going. Thank you, Honourable Minister. There's a little reception, I think, a little later for those who have the energy to join that. But otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you.